The one thing that I was really adamant against happening happened in this week's story of Doctor Who. Oh yes, we're going to talk about that, and to be honest with you, I should have stuck with my initial gut instinct last year when I had the theory that this was going to happen, and then I convinced myself that it wasn't going to happen, but then it did happen. At least I can admit when I'm wrong. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, switch on the notification bell so that you know I am releasing another video. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed already. I cannot run this channel without you. Please remember, especially with this one today, to keep it as friendly as you possibly can in the chat, because I think this one is probably going to draw a fair amount of heat. Before I begin the review of this story, I would like to say this, and I say it every week, but I am going to reiterate it even more this week. It is okay for you to like this story. It's okay for you to like this doctor. It is okay for you to like this series. I don't have a problem with that. It's also okay for me to not like something. It is okay for me to not like this doctor. It is okay for me to not like this series. We can agree to disagree, and that is fine. I do not know at the current time of recording what this video will be called. However, if I have an opinion that is opposing, or it seems like this is something more negative, it does not mean that I hate the show, and it does not mean that I shouldn't be watching it. I stuck with the Jodie era, and there were things in that time period that I did not like. Flux, gender swapping of the Doctor, timeless children. I will discuss those in different videos. There is a Jodie story coming up tomorrow. But I stuck with it, and there were things that were in the Jodie era that didn't bother me whatsoever. I had issues with the 3 specials, but not to the extent that I am having with the last 2 series of Doctor Who. But I will be as fair as I possibly can. I won't rip it to shreds. So I will give you a brief synopsis, and then I will go through what I thought, and I will back it up where I can. This is how I do my reviews. I don't go blow by blow like other channels. It's just my style. The Interstellar Song Contest was written by Juno Dawson, and it is the first story to be written by a trans writer for the show. The Doctor and Belinda land in the Harmony Arena in 2925, where they are hosting the 803rd Interstellar Song Contest. Ryan Clark has been in cryogenic suspension and essentially defrosted to host this particular event. And yes, this is meta. It is what I would call the equivalent to being the Eurovision Song Contest, but set in space. I know another Doctor Who story that's a bit like that, and it's called Bang Bang a Boom from Big Finish. The Doctor sets up the Vindicator to get his reading. We also see Mrs. Flood, and she is looking down at the Doctor through her theatre binoculars. And she says that she's now got the 4 Vindicator readings links that she needs. So after a lot of chit-chatting in the first 5 minutes or so, we finally get some action when a character named Kid is introduced. He is a Hellion from Hellier, and he is here for revenge on the corporation that sponsored the Intergalactic Song Contest. The reason why is because the corporation bought his planet because they wanted the hell poppy for the honey flavoring. So they take the poppy seeds and they burnt the fields. And this is why Kid wants his revenge, because the beautiful planet had been destroyed. So Kid and Wynne, who is with Kid, open the top of the arena and send the audience into the Mavity bubble above, and he starts uploading a primitive delta wave into the system to annihilate 3 trillion people. The Doctor finds out this is what he wants to do, and so the Doctor seeks to put a stop to it by using a hologram to electrocute Kid with. So he doesn't do the punishment himself directly, even though he is in the room, but he loses control, and we see visions of his granddaughter Susan telling him to stop. The real version of himself blows up the device that Kid was using to upload the primitive delta wave system to off the 3 trillion people with, whilst the hologram keeps on electrocuting Kid. Belinda rushes into the room, tells him to stop, and he stops. Kid and Win get taken away, and the baddie is done and dusted with in approximately 27 minutes. Yes, you heard that right. 27 minutes, approximately. The Doctor then has some time to get other people to revive the people floating around in space by projecting them back into the space station and then essentially defrosting them. We then have time for a song. The TARDIS, which had also been blown into space, is brought back to the Doctor. We see a hologram of Graham Norton then telling us that the world had ended on the 24th of May 2025 and the planet had been disintegrated into rock, dust and ashes. People had died in a single second and the cause was unknown. Belinda and the Doctor go back to the TARDIS. The Vindicator is now working so they can focus in on the spot where they need to get to. However, we hear the cloister bell, the TARDIS goes red and the doors implode. It briefly cuts to the credits and then cuts out of the credits for the next reveal. Mrs. Flood, who had been there watching the contest, had also been taken off into space above the arena, and upon revival, she asks if the Doctor was still there. Mike and Gary, who had been helping the Doctor, confirmed that he had gone. And she said that was good because one of the 2 brain cells she had been frozen. And she said that was bad for a time lady. And then she bioregenerates. And we see Archie Panjabi for the first time. And we get the reveal that she is the Rani. And that's where it ended. There was no trailer of any particular type or any particular cliffhanger other than the fact that the Rani had reappeared and that she was going to make sure that the Doctor had terror. So we'll start off with the Rani, seeing as I finished on the Rani when we had the series last year and we were going around making predictions about who she might be, Mrs. Flood that is. For a brief moment in time, I theorised that Anita was the Rani. I don't recall if I made that prediction on here, but I know I said it on the Sense Sphere. At least once, maybe even twice. And then when I came to do the time and the Rani for my Sunday reviews, I did some research into the character itself. And I was also comparing in my brain the character to Mrs. Flood. And I was like, there's no way that these 2 characters can be the same, because whilst you can go in and say Mrs. Flood and say Rani and Rain, Mrs. Flood was constantly breaking the 4th wall. There's nothing in the character to suggest that it was the same character as the Rani. And I know there were lots of issues surrounding this character in the past with regards to bringing her back. And if you don't know what I mean, go and check out some of my past videos on this particular character. But it's to do with the copyright. It just seemed very complicated because it was a joint ownership of the character with regards to Pip and Jane Baker, and it was all surrounding their estate. So I put myself into some sense of denial because I didn't want the character to come back either. I didn't think it would be the correct move to bring her back. I believe that the character has no major real interest in the Doctor. In her first story, she definitely didn't. And in her second story, the only interest that she had in the Doctor, because it was moving over from Colin Baker to Sylvester McCoy, was getting him to fix something for her. And that was it. Other than that, she didn't really care. And my question would be, what on earth would they do with the character? I guess we will find out what they will do. But I was also really hoping that it wasn't going to be one of RTD's stare you in the face things. I was hoping that he was going to be going in the complete opposite direction rather than be predictable. And we had the nonsensical, predictable story. And I tell you what confirmed it and gave it away to me in this story was the bit that she did towards the very beginning when she's holding the Vindicator readings, and she mentioned that she had all 4 links of the readings now, and I thought, looks like I was wrong. She is the Rani. She's obviously doing some kind of experiment thing where she needs the Doctor. I also should have been paying more attention to what he said, because this is RTD, because he did say that people had already guessed it. So that's also kind of worrying. However, she's back. It's worrying because they kept mentioning it, and so it must have been even more blatantly obvious. Anyway, like I said, she's back. So it'll be interesting to see what direction they will take her character in. I'm just hoping that they will not undo the character at all. However, it's a very big risk. I also thought at the beginning, when I did twig that it was going to be the Rani coming back, that there was absolutely no way that they were going to keep Anita in that character permanently. And lo and behold, I was right. They did a Jacoby. So they wanted to go younger rather than giving Anita something to do. They gave her all the lead up, all the mystery to this character, only to regenerate her at the end and essentially make her into a bumbling sidekick. That's what they were going to do. And essentially they did that with Derek Jacobi when they brought him back for the Master. Well, brought him in for the Master. The big reveal was that he was the Master and then he regenerates. They put her down with the Rani and they made her a Rani, and they made the new Rani the definite article. And I find that quite funny because I guess you could say the David Tennant Doctor is a Doctor and the Gatwa Doctor is the Doctor, the definite article. And also, if you look at it, it's also a bit of a snub to Kate O'Mara, who was the original Rani, a little bit, if you want me to be quite frank, and a snub to Anita Dobson. Oh yeah, they're just sidelines now. They are not the definite article. This is the new Rani. This is the Rani. Now, the new Rani is played by Archie Panjabi. Now, I didn't know exactly what she was going to be doing in Doctor Who, but I must say, this is a good cast. A very good cast indeed. Despite her taking over almost immediately from Anita, I believed immediately that she was the Rani from her first line delivery. I was like, oh, yes. Absolutely. I think with her hairstyle, they tried to do an amalgamation of the 80s poof hairstyle that we have seen her having in the Time and the Rani, and the long hairstyle that she has in the Mark of the Rani. I wondered if she also went over those 2 particular stories, because they are Rani stories, and watch what Kate O'Mara did with the character. And we all know that Kate had a very certain way of playing the character. There was an element of elegance to the character, and I saw that right away with Archie. Whatever they decide to do with the character, I think they have made the right decision with the recast. I do feel like Anita Dobson could have had the chance, though, to do at least one story before the regeneration or the bi-generation. I think they gave it all that build-up, and it was a bit of a lame duck not to let her have her moment. However, back to Archie. Oh, and before I carry on, they are going to have to fill in a massive plot hole, because last time the Rani had been held hostage on another spaceship, so they're going to have to fill all of that in, I guess you could say. The issue that I have with the reintroduction of the Rani is that this story was quite flat and underwhelming in many respects. So when she came into the story at the end, she somehow managed, this is Archie, to upstage absolutely everyone, and even to a degree with Anita, without really trying. She instantly dominated the screen. She did more acting than everybody else. And for me, who never says an actor is bad, that is quite something to say. It is easy to do that with this type of character. I've always talked about elevated status with characters that are supposed to be bad. You instantly have that level of animosity, that vengeance right there. So you can play off that. Whereas a good character, you really have to build up your character a lot. So I like the new casting. I think they could have used Mrs. Flood a lot more than what they did in this story. And Archie unintentionally upstaged everyone. Now, I do think that this was an appropriate choice. No, let me rephrase that. Do I think this was an appropriate choice of writer to reintroduce a character like the Rani? No, I don't. I know that Juno only had to write a few lines. However, when you're charging someone with not much experience in writing scripts for screen, in particular with Doctor Who, I know that Juno has written a Doctor Who novel, but that's a different kettle of fish. The big responsibility to make sure that they get it right, and I can confirm that Juno did write this story because it sounds like Juno in the text. It sounds the same as the books. The cadences, I should say, sound the same, just to be more specific. And I know that Juno is a fan of the show, but I think it would have been better entrusted to someone who has much more experience. Even RTD, I would say it would be better to have had RTD to do the reintroduction of the Rani, the writing for it. And I would have much have preferred it to have Susan being reintroduced by someone like RTD as well. No matter what he has done with the last two series, I think it would have been better handled, so to speak. Now, I would have liked for RTD or some other sci-fi writer to have handled the reintroduction of Susan as well. I don't know if she's going to be connected to Belinda or not either. However, we do see Susan telling the Doctor in his vision to stop when he is electrocuting Kid, and then Belinda runs into the control room and tells him to stop, and then he stops. So that maybe there is a connection there. But is it a good idea to bring Susan back as well? And I don't think so. For those of you who do not know, because there will be those of you who don't have any connection to this character whatsoever, Susan was the Doctor's granddaughter. It is mentioned in The Devil's Cord. It doesn't really get mentioned again. They were implying in this story that Susan had died, and that's not correct if that was the implication. He says about him being the only Time Lord left, that was the Doctor. Well, he left his granddaughter in the future on the planet Earth. We see him do it at the end of the Dalek invasion of Earth. So I don't know if that was continuity error or not. I guess we will find out. But in the type of dream vision sequences that we see her in, she's calling out his name, grandfather. She's telling him to stop, and it's all very urethral. But she also says to find her. So there's a mystery there waiting to be solved. I just want to also talk about the classic characters very quickly before I continue on with this review. Over the years, we have seen a lot of classic characters come back into the stories, and I think we are now at the stage where most of them have been exhausted. So we've had Daleks, Cybermen, Sontarans, the Master, and many other characters such as the Silurians. And in recent years, Davros has also been changed. The name of the Celestial Toymaker was also changed to just the Toymaker because that was problematic, and Sutek, was changed because he was also problematic. And now we've got the Rani back and Susan, and I think we are probably at the stage, I think, where we should stop using classic characters in order to keep classic fans of the series watching, because what they essentially do with these characters do not seem to leave classic fans happy. So yes, I am worried what they are going to do with Susan, and I am worried about what they are going to do with the Rani. It's got to the point where it would appear that the classic fandom may not be able to fully trust what they are going to do with the classic characters. That's just an opinion though. They may surprise us with this series. You never know. What they do seem to carry on doing though is using meta stuff. This story is unbelievably meta. I don't know what to think for the American fans, all right, because this particular story is a massive reference to the Eurovision Song Contest, and you probably wouldn't even know what this is. And today is the official air date of this year's Eurovision Song Contest. It's been leading up to it all week. There's been hype around it, of course, so naturally they are going to make a meta story. This entire series has been meta. They use a man named Ryan Clark. For those of you who do not know who he is a TV presenter here in the UK. He's very charismatic. He is very well liked. He does the commentary for the semi-finals of the Eurovision Song Contest, which is probably the reason why he is in this story. And I spared him judgment with this announcement because I'm not too keen on TV presenters playing themselves in a TV show. I did state that it was a heightened version of himself that he was going to be playing, and that's exactly what it was. I did reserve the judgment. I didn't want to come in too harsh. And I think that for what it was that he did, absolutely fine. You can tell that he doesn't have acting experience, but the presenting bits that he did, he was very good at, and he was playing a heightened version of himself. And I know how difficult that is to do. I've done Godspell, and in that, you don't have a named role. You are essentially yourself, just a heightened version of yourself. So I respect the fact that he had a difficult thing to do, because is that, how do you play it? I love the fact that if you choose any of the TV presenters that we have in the world to be in cryogenic suspension, then of course, naturally, it has to be Rylan. The only thing that I didn't like was the fact that they did a teeth glint on him. That was really quite bizarre and a bit cheesy. But I don't particularly think this story was necessarily what I would deem to be quintessential Doctor Who. So I guess in that case, I just have to take it for what it was. So they do cast another celebrity in this, and that was Graham Norton. Now, I don't have much worry about Graham Norton, and the reason why is because Graham has done acting in the past. And you can tell. He gets to deliver a big plot reveal. And, well, I think you can probably guess what that is. But he does reveal to us that the world ends on the 24th of May. And I will let you know if it does end on the 24th of May. I don't know how I'll do it, but I will let you know. Anyway, the planet Earth has disintegrated into rock, dust and ashes, and people died in a second, and the cause was unknown. Now we've got some real jeopardy. I like that, and I like how it was written. And you see, I can even praise Juno when I need to. I like that bit. Very well written. And I think it helps setting up the next story reasonably well. We got a really good bit as well, because we know that the Vindicator is working with the cloister bell and the TARDIS door. The TARDIS door explodes, or implodes, I should say, in towards the TARDIS. I like how they are doing the alerts with the TARDIS. They are utilising the TARDIS walls and making it flash when there's an issue. That's all good. And it's about time we saw that set being used. I really do like how they've utilised that set this series. I don't think, though, that we should have cut to the titles at that point. I think they should have gone straight into the reveal of the Rani, because by cutting into the titles, it took away from the impact of the reveal of the character that people knew was coming. But I do like how they revealed how they were returning the characters, right at the end of the story, just swap the titles around, I would say. It's very clear also in this story that it cost a lot of money. I would imagine that there was a certain degree of green screen used in this one, because obviously they don't really build many 3D models anymore. The arena is in a space station. I can imagine that was all CGI. The characters floating around in space was also CGI, I would imagine, with some practicality thrown in there. There were a lot of costumes in this particular story. And I really like the costumes actually in this story, but I would also imagine there were a lot of extras that were also generated by some form of CGI. So what I am saying is, yes, I can see where nearly all of the budget of the money in this particular story has gone alone. It's just a shame that they've applied this amount of money and budget to a story that essentially, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, is unrecognizable from Doctor Who. The only recognizable bits really is the fact that we've got the Doctor in it, the TARDIS in it, and Juno was quite particular in mentioning things like Mavity, Alpha Centauri, primitive delta wave, temporal lobe, and things like that. And also it being set in space and a space station. I would have liked more time to dedicate to the world building around the Hellions. I was quite intrigued by these characters, and it was essentially a very capitalist story that doesn't really go anywhere. They have a character in it called Cora, and she's quite a good character. She is also Hellion, and one of the best bits in this story was when she shows us the back of her head and her horns are shaved off. She is there illegally entered into the contest. She's in disguise because she wants the chance to sing, and that was a part of her wanting to be accepted, the Hellions to be accepted. It was all about acceptance. She has the right approach, I guess you could say, so to speak, whereas Kid and Win are doing this because they want revenge on the corporation. I mentioned in my brief synopsis that the corporation were doing what they had done. They bought the planet because they wanted the hell poppies for honey flavoring. So now they own the planet. They burnt and damaged the fields, and the corporation sponsors the song contest. I also wasn't too keen on the Belinda mentioning drugs. Okay. And I say it that way because I risk being demonetized if I say it the way that, well, YouTube just doesn't like it, basically, is what I'm going to say. I would have liked to have seen a bigger lead up to that because we are expected to connect to these characters, especially the bad characters. I think in this case to understand where they're coming from, but the impact is just not enough. And unfortunately, I think because of the time constraints, and this is one of the reasons why if they do bring the show back, they need to pause it, overhaul it, and change how they do the running time of it. For example, at the beginning, we've got this pretty flat introduction because they focus on introducing Rylan first. And as much as I love Rylan, if we had got to witness perhaps what happened to the planet and the motives behind Kid and Win from the get-go, then maybe we would have had much more of a connection to these characters and everything that's going on behind this story for the reason, and we understand why they are doing it and why the Doctor ends up behaving the way that he does. You see, because I really like the idea of the Hellions uploading data into the transmission system in order to off everyone, but because we don't have that connection in that story, there is no payoff for it. I don't think we should be spoon-fed it, but I think we should be allowed that type of build-up. It's something that Classic Who does very well, but Juno is on a time constraint, so there's only so much that can be done. Something that Classic Who also did a lot better than compared to the series as we know it now, and I'm not just talking about Juno's story, I'm talking about all of them, is Jeopardy. Now, I won't lie to you, Juno does give us Jeopardy. It's there. I don't know if it's enough Jeopardy because it's one of those stories where everybody lives. We had that like 2 weeks in a row, and whilst I don't mind it for an occasional story, I prefer it to remain occasional. I'm hoping that we're not going to get a big reset button next week as well and have another Everybody Lives. I do appreciate that there is a lot more Jeopardy compared to last week, though. It is essentially another bottled story. I'm a bit funny about that, but I'll take it for what it is. It did lead to perhaps one of my favourite bits in the entirety of series 2 so far with the Doctor. And I feel like at this stage, that's probably high praise indeed. I don't know why I like this bit so much. I really don't. But the Doctor gets blasted up into the bubble of space in the space station, and he starts to freeze. That's when we see the first vision of Susan, which visually looks very stunning. However, this is a potential moment where the Doctor is in absolute danger. Although I will say, if the Rani has to regenerate because one of her brain stems is frozen, then surely that's got to happen to the Doctor as well. Or maybe because he didn't entirely freeze. Anyway, ignore that. He defrosts and he grabs a confetti cannon and he uses the confetti cannon and he sets it off to fire him backwards into the space station. He lands back in the space station, but he's gasping for air. He turns around and promptly collapses on the floor, and I found that hilarious. That's definitely one of my favourite bits, if not my favourite bit of the entire 2 series. It was just so funny, and the way Ncuti played it was brilliant. Definitely high praise indeed. And I'm not being negative, I'm not being mean in that sense. I genuinely mean that was one of my favourite bits. I was giggling when I was writing this review, and I'm giggling right now. So that says a lot. So full credit there for that bit. So the Doctor, though, is not really what I would call the Doctor. At certain points in this story, I do believe that it is one of his better performances as the Doctor that we've had from Ncuti so far. It's not zany, it's not off the walls. He has a fair, reasonable balance in this, I would say. The speech that Juno wrote for the Doctor, though, is questionable indeed, and I just want to quote something that Terrance Dicks once said, and I want to thank my friend Michael for sending this quote over to me. I think this is, well, it's very fitting for what I am just about to tell you, especially for those who didn't watch it. He sent this over as I was writing the review. This is what Terrance Dicks said about the Doctor. He never gives in and he never gives up. However overwhelming the odds against him, the Doctor believes in good and fights evil. Though often caught up in violent situations, a man of peace, he is never cruel or cowardly. So everything that we have had for the last 2 series has been, well, almost opposite of what Terrance Dicks once said. I even think with Chris Chibnall, somehow he managed to keep it within the realms of that, even with the Jodie Whittaker Doctor, and even that's a bit of a stretch sometimes. We've definitely not had it with Gatwa, and that's not on the actor, that is on the writing team and the people who are at the top not checking this, for changing the character of the Doctor entirely. And I won't necessarily blame Juno. Juno is following instructions as well. So it comes from the very top, and that's where the buck really stops. So this is what the Doctor says to Kid after he finds out what his plans are. And do you know what I will do? I will survive and I will find you, and you can run and hide and whimper all you like, but I will find you because you have put ice in my heart, darling. You put it there, so I will cast your body out into the void, and I will stand and watch you freeze to death. That's what he said. So unless the Doctor is at the end of his regeneration cycles, and he regenerates into a character like the Valiard when this rumoured regeneration comes around, and if that happens, okay, there's not really a reason for him to say this. I know people argue that he is a broken man because he's split in half, so there is this darker side of him. Well, if there is this darker side of him, just make him the Valiard. despite what I said about the classic characters coming back, because that would make much more sense for that to happen. So unless Juno was told a specific reason as to why it had to be put in like this, then there was no reason for this at all. There would have been some kind of really big payoff, really, in order to make the Doctor like this and make the Doctor work. There hasn't been that payoff, so there should be this payoff. Because what I see right now is not something that I would associate with the Doctor. And also, in last week's story, the bad guy got let off. But in the previous week's story, Lucky Day, the bad guy didn't get let off. And in today's story, the bad guy also didn't get let off. In fact, they both got threatened. And the Doctor electrocuting Kid. Now, I know he's not doing it directly himself, but he gets someone to turn him into a hologram, even though the Doctor has the ability to turn himself into a hologram, so that he can do that to Kid. And this is a family show. That's got to be absolutely terrifying. I do think that Doctor Who is now starting to remove itself from the family genre and is probably becoming more adult viewing at this stage, because imagine a child's hero behaving like that. This is a man who had issues with bumping off an entire race of Daleks in the genesis of the Daleks. He questioned himself. Is this a common thing to see the Doctor doing now? We always saw him questioning himself, doubting things like that. He would argue the hypocrisies behind things like that, what he's going to do to a specific race and the potential consequences that it could have. We don't see that with this Doctor. He's reckless, absolutely reckless. So yes, I wasn't too keen on the Doctor electrocuting a character to the extent that we saw, especially when the Doctor is not really associated with things like that to that extreme. And yes, we also do see the Doctor resolving the situation, an absolute plus, and I am a firm believer of the Doctor resolving the situation. However, he was telling other people how to resolve it. I think that it would have been pretty good and pretty heroic if we had seen him do it rather than other people doing it. I will also say this. I really still do not like Belinda. I find her very self-centered, and if she turns out to be Susan, well, I'm not sure how I'm going to take that piece of news if that does happen. I'm wondering if she is connected to Susan somehow. This is what she said earlier. However, I don't think that the character of Belinda has that much depth to her. I think she's quite a shallow character. I've talked about it before, where we've had characters who didn't want to be in the TARDIS, for example, Tegan, Barbara, Ian, but they are all likeable in some way. Very likeable, in fact, in particular, Barbara and Ian. They've not made her likeable, and I'm questioning the acting choices of the actress. I know that she's only got a certain amount to go on, but her energy level compared to Gatwa is very low. Having said that, this is probably the best performance that she has given us so far. I do think that her character that she had in Boom, was it Monday Flynn, was a lot better portrayal-wise and probably writing-wise as well. I've got a couple of quick points to make. I find that the music is quite overbearing in this particular story. There were times when I couldn't hear what the characters were saying. I also have reason to believe that we are in some kind of alternate reality, and we are sticking to that because there's Mavity involved in this. I'm wondering if the Rani is also the big boss that has been mentioned in the Star Piece, or maybe she's just an interim enemy, a bit like Sutek working for the big boss. And please, can we stop it with the babes and the darling? We had it barely at all last week. Thank you, Mr. Ellams. Thank you. And this week it was like overload on it. One thing that's also stopped this story from moving was when they were talking about Cora. The quote was, Cora St. Bavier, she, her. Yeah, we had a tiny little moment to stop the plot point to address pronouns. I'm going to request this. If, no matter how much I don't like it, but if you are going to do it, please be consistent and do it all the way through or not at all. So, for example, when the Rani split into two, she introduces herself as the Rani, the definite article, with feminine pronouns, she, her. Make a commitment and stick to it, please. Also, cut the songs. There is a good chunk of this time dedicated to singing. We don't need that. This is what the story should be doing. It felt like filler, to be quite frank with you, and that's the same sort of issue that I had with The Devil's Chord when they did the dance routine at the end, and the church on Ruby Road where they sang that song as well when they were trying to save the baby. So overall, this really was not, in my honest opinion, a story that I would say was Doctor Who. I think last week's was much more Doctor Who. I just had to watch it in this case and take it for what it was worth, which wasn't very much. In my opinion, I have pointed out the good parts in this that I liked about it, and I've pointed out the parts that I didn't like about it, and I've said things that I think would have been a better idea or could have been worked on. I'm not a sci-fi writer. Okay, I'm not an expert in that sense. I do appreciate that it's not easy to write these types of stories. I think that they are going to have to work really hard on paying everything off so far that we have had this series. And yes, I am worried about what they are going to do to Susan and the Rani. I think that the overnight ratings for this story will be higher than what we've got average-wise. It is sandwiched right between the football and the Eurovision Song Contest. So the most telling figures will be the 5-minute breakdowns, which I'm hoping that we will get because of the potential higher ratings. But time will tell. So let me know what you think about the story. Please do remember to keep it as nice and friendly as you can. Chat about it, don't shout about it. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.